One of the worst storms of 2024 is coming to the United States today, and this could bring a significant threat for long-tracked and strong tornadoes across the central and southern plains, where a tornado outbreak is imminent. The Storm Prediction Center has mentioned that a high risk for severe weather could be issued later today for the tornado threat across parts of Kansas and Oklahoma. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what this means for your area and where the greatest chance for tornadoes will be, and as well as the damaging wind and hail risk that are not being talked about enough. So let's begin with what the risk is for today across the United States, and we're going to begin with the Great Plains. That is where we do already have a moderate risk for severe weather, which includes a large chunk of Oklahoma back into southern Kansas, where the chance for strong and long-track tornadoes will exist. You need to make sure that you have a tornado action plan in place today, have multiple ways to receive alerts, and we'll be live later today here on YouTube, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Outside of this area, we do have an enhanced risk that goes from southeastern parts of Nebraska back into western Missouri and even back into very far northern parts of Texas, and a slight and marginal threat that go from South Dakota back through Texas and as far east as Illinois, which the majority of storms that happen over here later tonight will be damaging wind and maybe a couple tornado producers, so make sure that you're staying vigilant there. So here is one of the greatest concerns for today, which is going to be the hail threat. We currently do have a large area that we're watching for significant hail. This hatched area does represent at least a 10% chance within a 25-mile radius of significant hail greater than 2 inches in diameter. The maximum hailstone size that I have forecasted for today is the size of grapefruits, so make sure that you're protecting your vehicle. Do not leave that outside today. It is not worth it, especially with how much hail that could come out of some of these storms. Now, the good news about today for Oklahoma is that these storms are going to be very discreet, meaning only a couple of them or maybe a few of them will be ongoing. The bad news is any of those storms that are discrete are going to most definitely produce severe weather, including significant tornadoes, very large hail, and as well as damaging winds. The tornado threat right now is hatched anywhere from northern Kansas back into even very far northern Texas, including areas near Wichita Falls, where strong and long-track tornadoes will be a possibility later this afternoon into the evening hours. So make sure that you're staying very vigilant and being weather aware. Then later tonight, this will turn into mostly a line of storms producing damaging winds, large hail, and maybe even a few more tornadoes across a large chunk of the central plains. Any of this will mostly happen after sunset for the damaging wind threat that could be very significant across Kansas and even back into western Missouri, where damaging winds as high as 80 miles per hour will be a possibility. So with all that being said, make sure that you are subscribed to the channel. We'll be live later today. That'll be one way that you can receive alerts. In addition to that, make sure you have your mobile device handy, any weather radios ready, have flashlights on hand in case you do lose power later today, as things could get a little bit bumpy as we go into the afternoon hours. Before we go into the timing, I do want to go over the synoptic setup for this event as we go into today and tomorrow, because I think it paints a perfect picture for what we're going to be seeing for both today and tomorrow in terms of severe weather. So let's begin with the jet stream. This gives us an idea of the weather patterns that are happening across the United States, and we are going to have a negatively tilted trough for today and as well as going into early tomorrow, which is why we're going to see a big increase in terms of severe weather. You might be wondering, what does a negatively tilted trough even do? Essentially what it does is it creates a lot of spin throughout the atmosphere, especially in the mid to upper levels. In addition to that, we get a strong southerly pull, and any negatively tilted trough usually does bring some sort of severe weather aspect. In a lot of cases, we do see severe weather outbreaks. That's why this is so important for today and even into early tomorrow morning. So just keep that in mind. Once again, it is a very potent trough, and it's going to be a very strong low pressure system. The good news is as we go into Tuesday, this will weaken and broaden out, meaning that the Midwest will not see a whole lot of severe weather. It should be a pretty low threat with just some damaging winds. Back over in areas like the Ohio Valley and maybe even down into the Mississippi Valley, we could see some severe weather, but the overall concern is going to be pretty much lower than what we're talking about today. And then once we eventually go into Wednesday, we are going to have a low pressure system near the surface develop again in the central plains, and I do think on Wednesday we are going to have another significant severe weather outbreak that could be very similar, if not maybe even a bit worse than what we are talking about for today. But obviously that is to be determined. Depending on how today goes, it might be a little bit different. Here are the hodographs as well, giving you an idea about the spin across the atmosphere from the low levels all the way up into the upper atmosphere. And notice these hodographs across parts of southern Kansas and Oklahoma. There's a lot of twirl to them, a lot of spin, and what that means is that we are going to have a lot of spin in the atmosphere, meaning that tornado risk is going to be much more more elevated because of all the spin in the atmosphere. It will not take much for there to be a tornado today, especially with how strong the winds are across the entire atmosphere from the surface all the way back through the upper levels. So that's why that's also very important. And then the significant tornado parameter values do increase as we go into the afternoon, especially across Kansas, and they'll start to increase in Oklahoma as we get closer to 4 to 5 o'clock. Notice those values go upwards of 5, 6, and even 7 in some spots. So it's going to get very elevated across Oklahoma, meaning that this tornado risk is really going to start to ramp up. Now, I don't want you to look too far down to the south because the cap will be in place across most of Texas and even right along the Red River, and there might be 1 or 2 storms that sneak in there, try to pose a threat in Oklahoma in terms of severe weather threat, but I think overall that chance is very low. I think the majority of the storms that fire up today will be from Nebraska back into parts of Oklahoma. This should be the starting point for most storms, and then eventually they'll start to track to the east, maybe even a bit further back here to the west. We could get a couple of storms earlier in the day today. Now let's go through the timing, and we will begin with 12 o'clock, where a few storms will start to fire up right across the Nebraska and Kansas border, where the main concern is going to be large hail and damaging winds. But as we get closer to 2 to 3 o'clock, I do think that tornado risk begins to increase with this activity. So we might be live as early as 2 to 3 o'clock, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon down below so you're notified when we do go live. Once we get closer to 4 to 5 o'clock, those storms continue to evolve and move to the east, producing mostly a damaging wind threat. But once again, anything that is a little bit more semi-discreet could produce a tornado threat, and also anything even embedded in this cluster of storms will also have the chance to produce a couple of tornadoes. Once we get closer to 6, 7, and 8 o'clock tonight, we'll be watching a couple of different areas for discrete supercells, which are the ones that are going to produce the most significant long-tracked and strong tornado threat across anywhere in Oklahoma and Kansas, and that would be where we're watching for that development. Right here in western parts of Kansas, which again, that could be anywhere in this area for the record, not just that circle that I drew before, and also even across parts of central Kansas, back over right in front of the line of storms is another area that I would be watching for very, very closely. And then once we get closer to 7, 8, 9 o'clock, those storms continue to move east, and we'll continue to watch multiple storms across parts of Oklahoma producing the tornado threat. Now, don't really ignore this area. I know it doesn't show any storms on the future radar, but there is a chance that we could see 1 or 2 discrete cells even in parts of central Oklahoma that produce a strong and or long track tornado threat. So don't rule out that area. Make sure you're staying vigilant and have multiple ways to receive alerts. By around 10 to 11 o'clock tonight, those storms continue to move eastbound, and by midnight, most of the storms are still ongoing across parts of Oklahoma, with mostly a hail, wind, and maybe a couple tornadoes still being possible. And then after midnight, most of these storms are damaging wind producers, with a couple more tornadoes being possible across southern Iowa, parts of Missouri, and even northwest Arkansas, and perhaps even into eastern Oklahoma. So stay very weather aware across those areas. And again, we'll be live tonight, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Back over in Iowa and Illinois, we'll have that line of storms moving through early tomorrow morning, which will produce the threat for damaging winds and perhaps maybe a brief tornado or two. It will weaken as we go late into the morning, but we're going to have another explosion of thunderstorms tomorrow afternoon across parts of the Ohio Valley. Overall, I think this threat of severe weather is going to be pretty low to medium. I don't think we're going to have anything too significant when it comes to the tornado threat, but I do think large hail, damaging winds, and a few tornadoes will be possible. I just don't think it's going to be nearly as significant as today. I would still stay weather aware in case anything does get a little bit dicey. We'll probably also be live tomorrow, so make sure that you're subscribed to the channel. Now, as we go into Wednesday, I think things do become a little bit more concerning in terms of the tornado threat. Notice the significant tornado parameter values as we go into Wednesday afternoon and evening. They get quite high across parts of Arkansas, Illinois, eastern Missouri, and even back into Kentucky, and I do think we are going to get a more significant tornado threat as we go into Wednesday in the late afternoon through the evening, and perhaps even into the overnight hours, where we could end up seeing a nocturnal tornado threat. So again, details on this still remain a little bit uncertain, so stay tuned. We'll have another update video for this once we get closer and once things do become a bit more certain. If we do not have an update video, we'll be live on Tuesday with an update for you more than likely. So just make sure you're subscribed to the channel and we'll keep you posted with the latest. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.